Hello, I'm Matt Watts, and I'm asking what's on your screen. We all use the internet, but we all see completely different things. For example, I've wasted maybe over an hour today watching videos of a gang of gnomes running around H&M stores. This is all thanks to my friend Joel, who told me about a TikToker called Crawley, and he's kind of fascinating. He seemingly managed in short TikTok videos that have no speech in them to build an entire lore around these wizard gnomes. He himself can transform into a wizard gnome, and then he and other wizard gnomes seek the secrets which are hidden behind the tills in shops such as H&M. Their sworn enemies are the knights, who are people wrapped in tinfoil with various stainless steel cooking equipment attached to them, and there are various other horrifying, fantastical creatures that they do battle with, usually in a shopping mall. And I think it's the originality and the whimsy of it that really appeals to me, and clearly to many other people, because I'm very late to the trend and he's got millions of followers. But I had a bit of a journey regarding what I think about his videos, because I scrolled all the way back to the start to see what the origin of it all was, and actually, to begin with, he was just one of those TikTokers who was irritating people in public for no good reason. He was running behind the tills in McDonald's, not as a gnome, just as a man. And he'd give the camera a shit-eating grin, and that was the whole thing. And it got worse, because then he'd get other people to join him, and I just feel sorry for the poor minimum wage workers who did not sign up for this nonsense, who he's just happy to inconvenience for some likes on TikTok. But then, at some point, he starts crawling. He starts crawling around these malls, sometimes just running around in a squat pose, which is kind of what he does as a gnome, or sometimes pushing himself along with his legs while lying on his back. And he starts to amass large crowds of people who start crawling with him. So these shopping malls are just filled with people crawling around, and it starts to feel like performance art, because it's suddenly novel and interesting. And for a while afterwards, he switches between doing that and doing some other prank adjacent stunts, like pretending to be an escaped asylum inmate. And the part that leaves a particularly bad taste in my mouth is when he falls on the floor and fakes having seizures in public. But eventually, for no apparent reason, he lands on the gnome costume in June of this year. And this costume is a lime green cape, a little pointy hat, and a pink children's fishing net. Anyway, the point being, even if you spend as much time on the internet as me, you might not have the faintest clue what I'm talking about. You probably haven't seen the little man dressed as a gnome running around stores in Poland. But millions of other people have, and they probably don't see half the things that you see online. But I'm not just here to talk about the strange things that are appearing on my screen. I'm here to talk to a series of guests about what's on their screens. So why don't we get to today's guest? Stefan has always used social media to keep in touch with his friends, but that's getting harder to do.
The percentage of posts that you get that are from your friends is only a small percentage of the whole stuff that you see. A lot of it is every other one or every third is an advert, and then there are suggestions, etc. And it's the same with TikTok. Even though I was very, very late to TikTok, and I very deliberately followed a certain type of information, it really, really quickly just became the same experience of being curated for me rather than sought by myself.
And that's particularly frustrating if you don't actually know your online friends in real life. There was a period early on in the internet where we were all very naive, and it was fine to make friends with some stranger halfway around the world.
Yeah.
And then we got into kind of the stranger danger era of the internet. So from your perspective, how common now is it to make friends online? Do you see yourself as an outlier, or do you think a lot of people do that?
I think a lot of the people I spend time talking to online do. which is gay men.
I mean, by definition, that's a self-selecting group of people.
Yes.
The people that you talk to online talk to people online. But so there's a wider point about that specific demographic being more open to that.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's always been the case since the very early noughties with things like desktop PC-based apps like Gaydar and a lovely old website called Out Everywhere, which was the sort of not hookup-oriented version of Gaydar, which is just a way of queer people to meet each other online, basically, and start talking. And I think that started this behavior, which has continued to this day, of gay men chatting to each other. And there is a component of the isolation of being gay. I'm talking about my own experience, which is slightly different from a lot of younger people, because I'm in my 40s and I'm from a pre-internet growing up kind of era. But there was a feeling of being isolated, and the internet and those apps took that away. They solved that problem. That's where the willingness and I think it's not really confidence, but just the feeling that that's something that you can do, that you can make friends online. That came from, I think, that feeling of, I don't know anyone where I live. Oh, look, there's people on the computer that I can chat to on MSN Messenger.
So it sounds like, to begin with, you said there was a line drawn between hookup apps and dating. Is there a line then between dating and friendship and chat, or is that a murky grey area?
It's a totally murky grey area. Friendship and flirting and a sexual component to the conversation is a thing that is just part of, I think, male gay friendships. It happens all the time, and it constantly happens with every single gay male friend that I have all the time, and it's just part of being a friend, I think. Whether that's jokey or wishful thinking or one-sided or a little bit of titillation or just a little bit of fun, it is a mixture of all of that. But that's part of it, I think. And obviously, a lot of people are driven. A lot of single people are more driven to spend time online to find people because of that. Not being on hookup apps, but also on Instagram. There is no crowbar dividing line between the two. It's a fluid thing.
Did it make it complicated making friends online like that? Because if there wasn't that dividing line, you can't always tell if someone's in it for friendship or more. I separate them because, as you are happily married and monogamous, it must be easy to go, I'm just looking for friendship now, because you know your intentions.
Yeah, but we're not virtually monogamous. My husband and I are physically, in reality, monogamous, but that doesn't mean that we don't flirt with other guys and have conversations of that nature with other guys together and separately. But that doesn't answer your question, really. The answer is yes, it does make it difficult sometimes, because there are situations where you make friends with someone, and maybe there was flirtation or whatever, or you send nudes or something, and maybe that's over for one of the two people who are talking, and then there is a emotional discord there. There is a feeling of having to let someone down, if you will, in inverted commas. It's almost like a breakup, but it's definitely a change in a boundary in the relationship that sometimes happens, and it does quite frequently. And some people are good with that, and other people are not. And there's also these assumptions that people make, I think, in terms of monogamy and behavioral standards online that are really interesting when you're in that kind of gray area. Like, for example, both my husband and I, we've been in situations where we've had conversations with someone, and then somebody said, shouldn't you be talking to your husband about that or whatever? It's like, I do talk about this to my husband all the time. We have actually a very open and honest relationship and discussion about this. We're fully frank and everything's above board. We talk about this all the time. So, but a lot of other people do not. There is the sexual desire component doesn't stop when you're with someone, whether you've had that discussion or not. There's a lot of people who kind of like borderline cheating,
right,
because as a result of that conversation not having happened. So Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's the phrase some people use of emotionally cheating. It's not quite that, though, because we're talking about exchanging nudes as well.
Exactly, because that is something that may also happen. Developing an infatuation with someone is another thing from finding someone sexually attractive. And sometimes one of them happens, and sometimes both of these things occur, and they do. And it's just something that I think the only way to deal with that, if you're talking to people in that situation with that intent, is to be open about it and to acknowledge it to yourself. But that's a learning experience. When this first happened, both my husband and I felt like really ashamed and felt like we've done something wrong. We weren't supposed to be feeling the way we hadn't supposed to have been doing these things, etc., etc. And then we had started to have a conversation about it. And it's, like I said, just learning how to deal with it properly. I think that's the important thing.
So, who was the first person who you met online and subsequently met offline?
Are we talking in a friend context, or are we talking in a specifically romantic context right now?
Which came first?
The dating situation came first. Yeah. I had one boyfriend who I met online, and then the next one is Rob, who is my husband now. So that was that. But then when I started being in the relationship with Rob, I also met a whole bunch of people online, a lot of whom I've since met in real life. And the first person who came to mind when you asked the question was my friend Tim, who is, I think, certainly my closest friend in terms of frequency of who I speak to the most and who I see the most often.
Can I ask the story there? Where online did you meet?
Yeah, that's a good question. Twitter. It was Twitter. Yes, it was on Twitter. So it was something nerdy. It was probably it was a discussion about films or about books. It was on a thread where I believe we both commented on someone and we started discussing it and then chatted more about that. And that's the way it went. And we just continued.
Twitter was a very different place back then.
100%. Yeah, completely different.
I mean, for one thing, it was called Twitter.
Yes.
You talked earlier about how the social media trend is now towards the endless feed, and it's a very different environment to what it once was. Has that changed the way that you make friends online?
Weirdly, not really. No, it still seems to happen occasionally. I still chat to people, although rather boringly, the people I have recently spent more time talking to and become online friends with, the group of people has become a lot more diverse. So it's not just gay men anymore. It's much more diverse a group, which is interesting. It's also friends of friends. I don't know if that's always been the case for other people. I don't think that's necessarily about the change of the way these apps work now compared to how it used to be, but people seem to group around issues, and there is still the feeling of microcosms where you come across the same folks. Like if you're a socialist, trans ally, queer person, even on Instagram, there aren't that many people. It's the same faces popping up again and again and again, and you start talking more about, about those sorts of things. And if you're a gay man of a certain age with a beard, you seem to get a lot more exposure to other gay men of a certain age with a beard. And over the last few years, both Rob and I have become friends with this group of people in Chicago, and we've just become quite regular chatters with them. And one of them came over to London and we hung out for a couple of nights, and it was really lovely. So it's the most random coincidence, that the very, very simple fact that there's fewer queer people than there are heterosexual people has something to do with that. Something to do with people meeting. And because you then have interest groups of similar interests, which are, again, smaller. It's a smaller subset. I think there is maybe an increased likelihood of meeting people. And the thing is, when Rob and I went out with one of the chaps from Chicago, we put a picture of the three of us on Instagram, we got messages from another 15 gay men we'd never met throughout the United Kingdom, all saying, I can't believe you got to meet Andy, that's so cool, he seems so nice. So everyone also knew each other.
It almost makes it sound like there's only about 30 gay people.
Right.
Which
yes, it's so
I'm not
weird.
sure the stats back that up.
Not quite, no.
Do you think there is a potential that this shift towards algorithm-driven social media has perhaps made it easier to find these friends? Because instead of it prioritizing the people who you were already friends with, it's sorting you by its kind of advertising grouping, which probably somewhere you can probably download it. It's grouped you into gay man with beard.
Yeah. Lefty gay man with beard.
Primarily because it wants to sell you stuff, but also because it wants to keep you on the platform longer.
Yeah.
And a way to do that is actually showing you people who you might want to talk to.
Yeah. All hail the algorithm.
It's rare to find a silver lining to the algorithm, though.
Yeah, it's true. It's also intensely frustrating and depressing because obviously all I'm seeing at the moment is the misery our capitalist overlords are causing for the world, because that's what the algorithm seems to think that I want to read about. But I think you're right. I think that there is a way of grouping people, and it seems to be reasonably successful, because I still meet people that I like. They all also, according to my perception, it's not just politics, it's musical tastes, although gay men, musical tastes, but it's also levels of education, for example. There is a definite similarity in the people that I come in contact with. It's all very similar to me, which is sort of boring.
Earlier you said you think that there's a more diverse range of people who you're seeing.
Yes, but I meant that in terms of the queer spectrum. It's not just gay men, it's also, women, gay women, non-binary people, etc. And
it's diverse, but within the pre-existing grouping of queer.
Yes, exactly. But it's not based on physical attraction anymore. I'm having a broader conversation with lots of different people that's not specifically geared to, I fancy this person.
Is that you, or is that the platforms changing?
I think that might be my influence on it, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think it might be just priorities changing.
And you are a very sociable man who clearly has a lot of friends, both online and offline, but you're still making new friends. What's driving you to reach out to people?
Because the memes they make are really cool. Some of them. Literally, that is one thing. And also...
But some people will see a meme that they think is funny. And I mean, sometimes I don't even feel the push to like it, let alone strike up a conversation with the person who made it.
Yeah. Yeah, but sometimes I do. And I like having a conversation about things. I do. And you know me well, and you know that I have very dorky, nichey interests that I like to talk about a lot. And if I find someone who likes to talk about the same sort of things, it's thrilling, and I get a massive kick out of it. And it's, I think, also to do with learning stuff. There's a guy, Stephen Vogel, all hail Stephen, who I started talking to just because of his politics, and he writes a newsletter, and he's got a PhD in politics, and I just like reading and hearing him talk, because I don't know anything about politics, and he really does. So it's one of those things where I think, wow, he's coming to London in a few weeks' time. So if after years of chatting with him online, finally, hopefully meeting him soon. So that will be excellent. But yeah, I think that's definitely one of the reasons why, because I just like to find out stuff about people. And it's, to use this horrible analogy, it's almost like a filtration process of friends where some initial friendships don't last, but some really do. A few really do. It's not like I constantly talk to dozens and dozens of people online all the time.
And it's all driven by curiosity. Would that be a fair summary?
I think it's a nice summary. I hope that's true. I have a feeling of there being some sort of underlying need for, or want to be liked not the need for validation, but the joy of feeling validated, feeling liked, and feeling. I like talking about certain things, and if people like to talk to me about that, it feels nice to me. So there's that component of fulfillment and enjoyment as well. And I don't necessarily think that that's needy or, desperate in any way. It's just interesting and it's joyful. It's fun to have a good conversation, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's interesting that you're talking about both conversation and you also use the word being liked, because it illustrates the two different ways that people can interact online these days, which is out in the open, in public, posting pictures or tweets or whatever.
Yeah.
Where that is a currency, where likes and engagement is in the platform sense of it. And then there is conversation, which is the direct messaging. Mm-hmm. The majority of these friendships you're describing, where do they take place?
I think they almost always start with a bunch of likes or a affirmative comment on a post, and then pretty quickly become a conversation that gets taken into a side room, i.e. into a message.
Almost like real life. You meet someone at a party and you get on well enough that you decide to meet up one-on-one.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you ever had any bad experiences making friends online?
Yes, plenty, because you don't know what people are going to be like in real life when you meet them online. You have no idea, really. It's not a very good, secure screening process. It doesn't really give you anywhere near the amount of information that you get from meeting someone in real life. And there have been nothing really bad. Just sometimes you chat online for ages and then you meet someone and you think, really? Okay. This did not work. This was not enjoyable.
Is that more of you meet up and the chemistry, the flow of conversation just isn't there, or you meet up and they have been deceptive or selective in the way they've presented themselves online?
No, I think it's the first one. I think it's just it's more the chemistry in the way that you talk about stuff that you never discussed before online, and you realize, there's a real difference of opinion or a real character difference that you hadn't picked up on before. Or also the other thing is that a lot of people are very good at conversing online, but they're not in real life. They find it really difficult to make a conversation, to hold a conversation, and people can be rude and abrupt and just don't know how to be polite. And I'm very, very sensitive to that. It really pisses me off really quickly.
Is there anything related to age there? You know the phrase digital native, people who grew up in that sphere. I wonder if you've seen any evidence that they are worse for exactly that, being good at the online bit, but having not figured out in-person interaction as well.
Yeah. I've met a bunch of people in their 20s who are great conversationalists online, and then you meet them in person and they cannot get a sentence out. They're very awkward in their interactions, and I find it really surprising. But I don't know whether that is a generational thing or whether the people my age who are like that just never got into conversing online because there was a barrier to entry. It wasn't a natural growing into it process because you were old when it happened, basically. Not old, but older. Did I ever mention to you the great lesbian takeover of 2008? It's just something that I've been thinking about since we started talking. Whenever it might have been 2009, I don't know. But when Grindr, the app, became a big deal in Brighton always used to have a very male-dominated gay scene. And when Grindr became a thing, the gay men stopped going to pubs and started meeting at each other's houses for hookups. And then suddenly our lesbian sisters had the space that they could take up that they hadn't really had before because it was always crowded by gay men. So this is not my term. This is a term that I heard a bunch of times for people around the time, which I think is an interesting one because in its silly terminology shows that there was a shift of culture when that app came in, of behavior. There was lots of gay people in Brighton. There was lots of data to show this. It was obvious to people.
All 30 of the gays were
all
there.
All 30, yes, exactly. Yeah.
So with all of that in mind, have you got any advice for someone who is making friends online now?
I think the most important advice that I can give is to not make yourself vulnerable until you're really sure that you know the other person. And I mean in terms of, not opening yourself up to be hurt. Don't give it too much importance. Don't give that friendship too much weight until you know the person. Because it's very easy to be excited by meeting someone new, because it's exciting to meet someone new who you like, who has the same interests of you and interests as you do, and then you get infatuated really quickly. Only a couple of weeks ago, a friend of ours was chatting with us about such a friendship that they had struck up. Our friend was chatting to another guy, and they got on quite well, and they had booked to go on a date. And then he put a picture of himself on Instagram, and I liked it. And that guy got jealous of me liking my friend's picture and got upset about this and mentioned it. And it's like, oh, you're obviously seeing other people because, there's this guy liking it. That's my mate. What are you talking about?
How do you feel about this as a summary of that then? Don't give a friendship the value of a real friendship until it has become one.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. Yeah, that's the right thing. Yeah. There you go, kids.
Good luck out there, kids. And thank you very much for talking to me, Stefan.
As always, it's a pleasure.
That was Stefan. And if this interview gets you thinking about the strange things that make up your internet diet, or the interesting or uncomfortable and strange interactions you've had with people online, then why don't you share it with me like these people did?
So quick blast through my Google search history from the last week. Red Circle PNG, time in America. Wanted to know what time it was in America. Gerard Way. Who remembers Gerard Way from My Chemical Romance? Yeah, I was doing a bit of Gerard Way research. R2D2 toilet. I can't explain that one. Oh no, I think somebody said there was a screaming toilet which was online as the R2D2 toilet.
Oh, I found out that apparently to the world of TikTok, you finger girls the same way you bowl. So that's fun. So if no one could invite me bowling until I forget that fact, that would be great.
The adverts I get on Instagram are underwear for very petite women, lots of fitness products, so like a stretchy band thing that you can use for loads of different exercises, different kind of pull-up bars, and apps, fitness apps, especially apps that will help you to train to do a handstand. And I haven't searched for any of that, but I did mention it in some Instagram stories. And generally when I mention it, then it influences the ads that I get.
So if you want to share your own internet diet, follow me on Instagram and send me a voice note. You can find me at Matt Watts Makes Docs. That's MattWatts MakersDocs. In the meantime, please subscribe to hear more episodes and have a nice week online.